Hi everyone, this is BritSimon. I thought I'd create a video to help some of you with the form, the I-134. The I-134 is an affidavit of support. It's the non-legally binding version of affidavit of support. There's another one called the I-864, but the I-864 is used in other cases where a financial sponsor is legally bound to support the immigrant. And in such cases as family-based cases, etc. The I-134 is different, though. It used to be the only form used, but some years ago it was challenged in court and is not legally enforceable. But it does represent a promise to the US government that you're going to help an immigrant. And so you need to take the form seriously, and you must not lie in the form either. There must be, the person filling out the form, the sponsor, is liable for any lies they tell in the form. So, absolutely don't tell any lies. But let's go through the form, and I'll show you how to fill in the form, because it's a new version. It was introduced just a couple of months ago, and it's giving some people some challenges in how to complete it. So I'll show you the form and where to get it, and we'll go through the process together. Okay, so let me just add this in. First of all, you can Google where to get the form, but it's on this site here, uscis.gov/I-134. Okay, you can Google that, it comes up very easily. And when you look at that, a couple of things to note on the page. There is an option to file it online, but don't do that. That's only for very specific cases right now, to do with Ukraine. And so don't do that at the moment. That's not to be used right now. Further down the page, you'll see that there's the form itself and the instructions to the form. Obviously, you should have read the instructions. Please read the instructions. I know it's a pain, but it's worth reading. Okay, so just so you understand the form. And if you're going to fill in the form, you're probably a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident in the USA who is offering to help someone who is a potential immigrant, a future immigrant, and you've offered to help them, probably because you've got some relationship with them. They're a family member, they're an extended family member, or a friend, or even a friend of a friend, right? There should be some relationship between the two of you, because otherwise, why would a complete stranger offer to support someone financially from another country? And so from a credibility point of view, there should be some sort of relationship between you already. Okay, let's have a look at the form. I did just mention there's some instructions. It's worth going through these instructions, but we'll start off with the form itself. And my main focus of interest, by the way, is diversity visa lottery. So I think about things in that way in DV cases, but this form could be filled out for other cases as well. I think K visas use it, and a couple of other types of cases. Okay, so the instructions I'll give you are kind of generic. You can apply them to whatever is your situation. Okay, so the basis for filing. I'm filing this form on behalf of myself as the beneficiary. That would be unusual. That I would not recommend filing this way, or another individual who is the beneficiary. The beneficiary is the principal selectee in a DV case, or the person that's coming from abroad. That's the beneficiary. If that person has a spouse and children, which are called derivatives in the diversity process, those people will be covered by this one form. Okay, so those additional derivatives are all included in this one form. You only have to fill out one form for the family. Okay, so you will probably choose another individual who is the beneficiary, right? You'll put in the family name, the given name and the middle name for the beneficiary. This is the immigrant that you're sponsoring, and you're going to give if that immigrant has a previously used name, you'll put that information in section 2. Okay, so this is all going to be about part 2. The first thing I'm going to tell you is all about part 2. This is information about the beneficiary. Okay, so fill that in. The date of birth of the beneficiary. Is the beneficiary male or female? and the A number. In DV cases, a person is unlikely to have an A number, so don't worry if the person says, "What's that?" That's normal. People wouldn't have an A number unless they have previously been an immigrant in the USA. You need some information from them for their place of birth, the city, province, and country. Country of citizenship, right? So somebody could have a different country of citizenship than their place of birth. That's possible. And then you give the passport number of the most recently issued passport. Really, in that particular case, use the one that they're going to present in the DV interview. Now, all of this information here, you'll obviously need to discuss this with your friend or family member that you're sponsoring, okay? And then the marital status. Are they divorced? Are they single? Are they married? Now, be very careful with this. Be very precise. A person is only single if they've never been married. If they were once married, they must have become widowed or divorced or whatever else if they're now single. It's very important that you get that. And legally separated is a specific court process that someone would go through. So unless they have legal separation papers, it doesn't mean they've just split up and moved to two addresses. That's not the definition of legally separated. So unless they've got court papers to prove that they are legally separated, then you don't click that selection. Okay. All right. So you'll continue down the page. Go to, again, part 2. It's still about the beneficiary. The mailing address. The mailing address is just where they live, basically. So just fill in the mailing address for that person. And is the beneficiary's mailing address and physical address the same? It is. It usually is. So you're just going to click yes there, right? And if you said no, that would be where someone is receiving mail at, let's say, a PO box, but they physically reside somewhere else. Generally speaking, that's not normal, right? So I expect you should understand if that's the case. Okay. Okay. The anticipated length of stay for an immigrant coming to the USA, they don't have an end date, right? So you would put from whatever date and pick a date for some time from now, probably a month from now or something like that. Whenever you're filling in the form, you're filling in this form probably because the immigrant has been given a scheduled interview. You don't fill it in a year in advance. You fill it in, let's say, a month in advance or something like that. So you don't have to be precise about the start date of when this person is going to be living in the USA, but you put an approximate date, right? Pick a month or 2 months from now. And then click on no end date, okay? Because this person is emigrating to the USA, right? Okay, the beneficiaries income. This is throwing people a little bit. Now, firstly, you would type in here, let's say you're sponsoring John Smith, right? John Smith, whoever. Date of birth, you'd put in the date of birth, right? But then you're going to choose in here and you need to type in the word beneficiary, right? Beneficiary. Okay. That is because that's the person you're sponsoring, and that should be the principal selectee. So if, let's say, there's a husband and wife and 2 kids, it would be one of either the husband or the wife who has won the DV lottery. That is the beneficiary, and the spouse is a derivative, and you would type the word spouse for the next person. So you'd have spouse, spouse, and you could put child, or you could put, if you wanted, you could put the word son or daughter or whatever else, right? Now, the income contribution to the beneficiary, is very normal that you would put $0 here because someone is moving from another country to the USA. It's unlikely that they'll be bringing an income with them. And so unless the situation is something different, that they're already in the USA and they have a job, for example, or perhaps the spouse or the derivative or the beneficiary themselves has got an international business where they're going to continue to receive the same income. Those cases are edge cases. Have a think about that. But generally speaking, it wouldn't matter if the contribution to the beneficiary is $0 here. This section is not really about how much money does the income for the beneficiary. this whole form is about you supporting them, okay? But if there is some sort of income, list it in here, all right? So I hope that's clear. And as I say, this form is designed to be used in lots of different sort of cases. So, for example, if a DV lottery case is adjusting status in the USA, they may have an income already, but they may also need the additional support of an I-134. And so that's a scenario where you would use the income box. Okay. If you've had reason to put any sort of dollar amounts in there, total it up and put the total income down here and put the number of dependents, right? So in this case, this is 3 dependents, the beneficiary plus 3 dependents, right? Because I've listed a spouse, a child, and a son. Okay, so then you're going to say, does any of that come from anything illegal source? Hopefully you're going to say no to that. Does any of that, yeah, if you answered yes, what's the amount, right? So obviously that would be disallowed. If somebody said, yes, I'm a drug dealer and I'm going to continue to sell drugs when I move to America, number one, that wouldn't be a smart thing to say or do. And number two, you would take that income out of their overall income statement here. Does the beneficiary's total income come from means-tested public benefits as defined in 8 CFR, blah, 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 right? So again, this is for the scenario that the beneficiary is already living in the USA and they're receiving some sort of means-tested public benefits. Ideally, don't even go there. Don't list that because that's a negative against them, right? So that would be disallowed. You're not really. This isn't about impressing anyone with their income. Generally speaking, 0 in here, and then not having to list any of that income is a better answer. Okay. If you answered yes, what's the amount of total income? Yeah, I think we've covered that, right? And then information about the beneficiary. And this one I would definitely steer clear of. This is, you can list the beneficiaries' assets here. In general, people will tell you things like, oh, well, I've got a car, I own the car. I'm going to sell that and come to the USA. Number one, that would not really be countable because it's a single car. If they had 5 cars, then 4 of the cars can be countable. But then you need to have valuations of the cars. You need to have supporting supporting information. It's just not worth getting into it. Same thing with a house. If you own a house, you've probably got a mortgage on the house. So now you need, if you're going to list that as an asset, and you can list that as an asset here, if you list that as an asset, real estate holdings, you have to have an appraisal on the house, and you have to show mortgage statements showing how much you owe on the house. It's a mess. Why would you do that? You don't need to do that. Okay, so anything you list here, you're going to be needing to provide proof. And I would say that in general, unless somebody has got very clear amount, like a checking account or a savings account with an amount of money, and you're prepared to show that statement, generally avoid this section. All right. Okay, so now that's covered part 2, which is all about the beneficiaries. So you've identified each of the beneficiaries, you've listed the beneficiaries, you've numbered the beneficiaries, you've provided basic information about the beneficiaries. So that's covered part 2. If you're a DV lottery case, then if I were filling this in, I would probably fill this in for myself on part 2 and send the form to the person that's agreeing to sponsor me, so you'll get the best accuracy. Okay, that's how I would personally do it, but there you go. All right, part 3 is about the sponsor. So this is the important part for the person filling out the form, right? So again, same sort of thing. You're going to put in the name and family name, given name, middle name, all of that. Any previous names used, list them here. Your address, etc. That's important. Same thing with, is this the physical address or a mailing address? Same sort of thing. Again, your information. Now, if you're an LPR, if you probably have had an alien registration number, okay? If you have an online account number, you could fill that in there, but it's not necessary. If you don't have them, just leave that blank, okay? What's your relationship to the beneficiary? That's important, right? So you could put friend, You could put family. You know, there's all sorts of things that would describe this, but you could put family member, or you could put something like, whatever is the reality, obviously, but you could put brother, right? You're the brother of the person that you're sponsoring. Okay, so whatever is the relationship, put that in there. That's an important point because you're establishing the connection between you and the immigrant, and that's important for the evaluation phase of this form. Okay, your immigrant status. Okay, so hopefully you should be a US citizen, a US national, or a lawful permanent resident. If you're a non-immigrant, then number one, you're going to have to give an I-134 number. But I would say in general, non-immigrants, because you're here temporarily with no permanent permission to stay yet, it's better to not fill this form in, right? Because then you get into the conversation of, okay, when are you leaving? How long will you be there to support your family member? So, so no need to fill that in, or if you're not a citizen or a lawful permanent resident, a green card holder. Okay, your employment status. You explain here whether you're employed or unemployed or retired, etc. Are you self-employed? You can put those all in here, right? So the typical one would be employed. It would be unusual that you would say you're unemployed or not employed. You may be retired, but if you're unemployed, this form is primarily about income, how you're receiving the income. So generally speaking, you'd say you're employed and you're employed full time, or you're employed self-employed, or whatever it might be. You indicate here in question 13 what you do as a job, what your company name is, etc. And if you're self-employed, you just list out, maybe you're an architect or something, or a doctor, or whatever you happen to be. Okay. And then you give the employer's address. Now, generally speaking, they're not going to write to your employer, but that's a possibility. If there was ever an investigation into whether you were telling the truth about everything in this form, then obviously you should have accurate information in there, right? So it's not that they're going to contact the employer, but nevertheless, get it right. Now, this next section is the important section. This is about the financial information. It's about your income and your assets. Now, let me just say from the beginning, the income is much more important than assets. If I'm sponsoring someone and I'm doing that based on assets alone, the assets need to be worth 5 times more than the amount of money I need to meet the federal poverty guidelines. I'll come back to the FPG in a minute, but basically they reduce the value of the assets down by 1/5. Right? So the income is taken 100% dollar for dollar against the federal poverty guidelines. So income is far more powerful on this form than assets. And in some senses, assets are also a pain, because all the comments I made earlier about assets and needing to prove the value of the asset and the liability on the asset, etc. If you list, for example, real estate holdings or a house or anything like that, all of those same things come into play. So in general, it's much more useful to show income on this form than assets. So have a think about that. And in a few minutes, we'll talk about the federal poverty guidelines, but have a think about that from an income point of view. Okay. Now, you would list yourself as the sponsor, and it says self, right? So you would type in here the word self. There are instructions here. You can read that there. So let's say you are Brian Smith, right? That's how the form is going to look. And then you're going to have, I don't know, Becky Smith, who's your spouse, right? Becky. And you're going to put the word spouse there, right? And let's say you've got one child, which is going to be Johnny Smith, right? And this is going to be your child. Now, I'm not putting in the dates of birth, but I expect you'll understand you need to list the date of birth there, right? Okay, so then you put in your income. How much income do you earn personally? So you put in your income. Let's say you earn $50,000, and let's say your spouse, your wife, earns an additional $25,000, and your kid earns zero, right? Because that's kids for you. They just cost you money. Now, your dependents in this case is 2, okay, and your total income in this case is $75,000. So you would put that total income here. You'd total that up. Now, for some reason, that's not letting me get in there, but you can total that up. By the way, you can type this information in and print it, or you can write in the information in black ink, a black pen. So either way, it doesn't really matter. So you do need to sign the form with a pen. You can't type the signature. So at some point, you're going to have to print out this form and scan the form back in after you've signed it. So you'll need to do that, okay? So anyway, that's how you fill in the income section. Again, the same questions that we mentioned earlier. Does any of that come from illegal activity? Hopefully you're going to say no. Does any of that comes from means-tested public benefits? Hopefully, again, you're going to say no. And then you could list out your assets. Now, like I said, I generally would not be listing assets if I were you. I would put in here a bank statement. Let's say, bank account, right? And, you can put Wells Fargo or whatever is your bank, right? Type of asset, you would choose your bank account. And let's say you've got $100,000 in there, okay? So you can list out that because it's very simple to attach a bank statement to this. But if your income is sufficient here, you don't need to list any of this. There's no extra prizes. It's not like someone gets, an extra green card or something because you've got a lot of money in your bank account. It doesn't work that way. You're simply trying to meet the requirement, and the requirement is based mainly on income. Okay, so you can list things here. There is this concept of net value for personal property. So this is where you could put jewelry and a donkey that you own or whatever you own, but whatever you own has got to be appraised, right? So again, it really is just a waste of your time. If you have an income that's sufficient to support this the person, then you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so that's that section. Again, go through the rest of the form. It says, have you previously submitted an I-134 on behalf of a person other than the beneficiary named in Part 2? I get this question a lot about how many people the person can sponsor. It is better if you're not sponsoring lots of people. In theory, if you earned a lot of money, you could sponsor multiple families at the same time. But in general, that just complicates things. So if you were to say yes, then obviously you're going to give all of the information. It's going to relate to that. It's just going to complicate the whole process. So in general, just do this I-134, for the person you know. Don't be doing this every 5 minutes for every person you know, within the extended family. Okay. The intention thing. This one always causes some problems. This one is really about intending or not intending to provide specific contributions. Now, if you say you intend, you're saying you intend to give a specific contribution. For example, I intend to give $300 per week to Martin, my brother, right? Who's the immigrant. That's okay, but it always brings up the question, or it can bring up the question of, is that enough money? So I personally prefer to one of two things. You either say, I do not intend to make specific contributions, right? In which case you don't need to explain the contribution, or you click this box and say you intend to give specific contributions, but you make the answer vague. You say something in here like sort of money, as much money as needed, or any financial support as needed for as long as needed, right? A sort of a vague, generic response. Now, ideally, just click don't intend to give a specific contribution, right? It's easiest. This form will be accepted anyway. So, if I were you, I'd just say do not intend, okay? Right, the signature thing, you've got the beneficiary statement here. they're certifying that they can read and understand English. They've read and understand every question. They understand things, and so they're going to click there in A, and they're going to sign that form, right? Let's see, where's the signature? Yeah, so the beneficiary signature is there, and again, that needs to be wet signed, right? Signed by pen, and fill out that, and then the sponsor is going to go through the same thing, and is going to attest that they understand English, etc., and give all the phone numbers, and then go through the signature part there. Okay. If you've used someone, an interpreter, then their information would come in here. But really, why would you be having an interpreter? It wouldn't make a lot of sense. But that's where an interpreter's signature could go. And if somebody has helped you prepare this form that's physically with you, you could put that information in there. The preparer could put that information. But again, why complicate things, right? Section 8 is about additional information. If you run out of space, if the person that you're sponsoring, for example, has more derivatives than you had space to list, you could include that here. And so you go in here and you say, okay, you fill out the name, and then you refer to the page number, part number, and item number that you're providing additional information of. So, for example, if you're listing additional beneficiaries, then you would go to the beneficiary box, which is here, and it would be part 2, page 3, and page 3, part 2, and question 17. So you come down to the end here, and you say page 3, part 2, question 17, and you could then add additional beneficiary names. Okay. So that's how you would do that. And again, if you need another item of information, you would again identify which section you're adding information to and put the additional information here. Okay. And that's it. That's the whole form. So it's once you break it down and you understand the difference between the sponsor filling in section 3 and the beneficiary being all about section 2, then the form kind of makes sense. It's relatively simple. You just have to, work through it, take your time with it, and and just use that. Now, this form was introduced in April. I think it's to be used exclusively from about now, the end of June. So there's a specific date. I think it's June 27th. But from that point forward, you have to use this form and this form alone. So if you'd previously filled out the other form, you're going to have to fill out this form. And it says it's got an expiry date of 10/31/22. You can ignore the expiry date. Okay, until they actually replace this form with another form, don't worry about the expiry date. It doesn't mean that you couldn't use this form in January of next year. Okay. All right. Now, the last thing I want to cover is how is this evaluated? How is this form evaluated? And there's a thing called the Federal Poverty Guidelines, right? Guidelines. And the reason I like this form is because you can get a really clear black and white answer as to whether your income is sufficient for the person you're sponsoring or not, right? Now, let's say in my example, I said the beneficiary was husband, wife, and 2 children. That's 4 family members. And in my example I gave there, you, the sponsor, are husband, wife, and 1 child, right? That's 3 family members. So you add up the 4 family members that you're sponsoring with the 3 family members that you've got, and that's a total family size of 7. And you check the Federal Poverty Guidelines here. We'll check it here. We'll go to the correct website here, and you get the answer for how many people is your combined family is 7, and therefore what's the Federal Poverty Guideline? It's 41,910. That's the amount of income that you would need as a minimum in order to support yourself and help your family member that you're sponsoring through the I-134. There's you can ignore these other numbers here. These do not apply for DV lottery. You can just take the Federal Poverty Guideline at 100% of that value. Okay. And if your combined household is more than 8 people, you just add an extra 4720 onto that number, the 8 number, for each additional person that's covered by the form. Okay, so it's the total of your family, their family added together. Get the number here and make sure your income is greater than that. If your income is greater than that, and frankly, 41,910, that's not a huge income in the USA. But if your income is in excess of that, then all of the assets that we were discussing earlier, they're not necessary. As long as your income is above that number, you're good to go. The form will be accepted. Okay. If your income is less than that, you can support that and make up for the difference with your assets. But in general, if you are earning less than the federal poverty guideline for the family size we're talking about, then you're probably not in a position to actually financially support someone. And your family member should really use someone else to give them the I-134, unless you're in a particularly unusual situation. Let's say you've got no income, but you've got a lot of assets and you're just living from your assets and you've got $1 million in the bank, right? Then yes, you'd be fine to sponsor someone. It's unusual, but you wouldn't meet the federal poverty guideline. It would be a bit bizarre, right? A retired person could fill in this form, but again, the income needs to be from private sources where they're getting the income, not the social security income that comes from the government. Okay. All right, I think that probably covers it completely. Hopefully that's helped some of you. There may be, nuances of detail that don't apply exactly right in your case, but in general, that should help the majority of people. If you've got specific questions that you think I haven't covered in this video, by all means, feel free to ask me either through the YouTube channel or at my blog, BritSimonSays.com. All right. Thanks, everyone. I hope this was helpful. Please subscribe and let me know if you give me a thumbs up if you like this video. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye now.